This video is going to look at weapon turrets for submarines in Barotrauma. We're going to be covering turrets, including the new ones from the Thunder and Ice update, weapon ammunition, afflictions, and damage. First off, we have coil guns. These are the default turrets you find on most submarines. The ammunition is small and has a high rate of fire, with 4 bullets per second. They have 4 different ammunition variants. We have regular, exploding, piercing, and corium, although that might be the wrong pronunciation. Do let me know in the comments below if there is a correct pronunciation. The regular ammunition has an ammo capacity of 200 per box. It does 10 structural damage and has a penetration chance of 25%. For afflictions to entities, it does 15 internal damage and applies bleeding of strength 1. Next, we have exploding ammunition. As the name suggests, it has a 3-meter explosive radius that triggers on impact. For reference, a crawler is approximately 1 to 1.5 meters in length. The explosive ammunition has an ammo capacity of 75 per box. It does 10 structural damage and 5 additional structural damage for anything hit in the blast radius. For afflictions, it does 8 internal damage, 1 bleeding, and 40 burning. The burning will apply to anything hit in the 3-meter explosive radius. Moving on to piercing ammunition, it has an ammo capacity of 149 per box, it does 10 structural damage, and has a penetration chance of 80%. For afflictions, this one does 8 internal and 1.5 bleeding. The final ammunition variant for the coil gun is the corium, which has an ammo capacity of 200, does 10 structural damage, and has a 25% penetration chance. For afflictions, this one does 28 internal, 1 bleeding, and also can apply a stun of 2 seconds to an entity. So lots of numbers and statistics, but what does it all mean? Well, unfortunately, the answer is also slightly complicated. To try and simplify things here, I'm going to break it down into who you are fighting, where you are fighting, cost, and availability. So first off, let's start with who. For example, large swarms would take more damage from exploding and piercing ammunition, with both being able to hit or penetrate multiple targets in tight clusters. Single targets with large health, however, you might be better off with corium, as it has a high affliction damage and has the added bonus of being able to stun entities. Usually the entities with more health do more damage as well, so it makes sense to keep them away. Next is where. If the entities you are attacking are already eating at your hulls, or a pirate ship is directly on top of you, explosive rounds are probably a bad idea. This is because they have that 3-meter blast radius. Remember, you can damage most things in the game, your own ship included. Next is cost and availability. Outright, you can buy regular ammunition for around 130 marks. This of course depends on your current faction reputation. If you have a fabricator on board, regular coil gun ammunition is super cheap to refill. All you need is lead and steel, both of which can be picked up for under 36 marks. Steel is readily available, and lead can be bought at mining outposts or by deconstructing used fuel rods. Moving up the chain in cost, we have piercing. This can be bought for around 271 marks. But is usually limited in supply. To refill it, it takes titanium aluminium alloy. This costs around 168. In addition, it takes 1 steel, which could be picked up for 22. However, whilst steel is readily available, there is usually a limited supply of titanium aluminium alloy. Next is explosive ammunition. It can be bought from stations for around 379 per box, but is usually very limited in supply. Crafting explosive ammunition requires IC4, an explosive that is made with the rare metal incendium. This resource can only be bought from military stations or deconstructed from alien artifacts. There is a very special note here which highlights one of the game's subtle economy mechanics. You can buy certain items, deconstruct them into their base resources, and sell those items back to a station for a profit. The explosive ammunition falls into this category. The last one on the cost and availability section is Corium. This variant can only be made using a fabricator and requires Corium, a rare metal. This can only be bought from mining outposts for around 180 marks, or deconstructed from alien artifacts. So I am aware at this point I haven't said which one is the best. And honestly, there really isn't one. Essentially, you have to ask yourself the following questions. What is currently available? What am I fighting? And where am I fighting? Hopefully that in itself should help you answer the question, which one should I go for? As cost and availability play an important role in choosing the ammunition variants. That being said, if you want to be cost efficient, we need to do some maths. So here's a table on screen now showing the damage for entities, structure, damage potential, and cost per bullet depending on how the ammunition was procured. The potential is worked out by multiplying the base damage with the percentage chance of a secondary affliction or damage occurring. However, the likelihood of multiple secondary effects triggering and piercing multiple targets is fairly low, but it's nice to see what the potential might be if they all did. As a closing statement on the coil gun section, the TLDR is, save your good stuff for more difficult situations. Next on the turret list, we're going to talk about railguns. These fire large projectiles at entities and structures. They fire one shell every 5 seconds and are limited to 5 shells per loader. There are 4 ammunition types for railguns. We have the regular railgun shell, the Corium variant, the nuclear variant, and the new canister shell. I will leave nuclear for the end of this video as it has a special mention and some other considerations that do not sit within the damage range of any other ammunition variants. The railgun shell is the standard ammunition for use with the railgun. It does 55 structural damage, 250 impact damage, and applies bleeding of strength 50. It can stun targets for up to 15 seconds and has a penetration chance of 60%. The railgun shell also has an explosive property, much like the explosive coil gun ammunition. If the shell hits a structure, it has an explosive blast radius of 2.5 meters. This applies 100 structural damage and 500 internal damage to living entities if they're within the 2.5 meters. The second shell variant is Corium. It does 200 structural damage, 800 internal, and 50 bleeding. And like the regular, it also has a 60% penetration chance and can stun to up to 15 seconds. It has a 3-meter blast radius that deals 100 explosive damage to structures and 500 internal damage to entities. Next, we have canister shells. The canister is different to other shell types as it's designed more like a shotgun. It has a high spread and low range. This makes it ideal for taking out clusters of entities at short range. Each canister fires 11 pellets. These do 15 structural damage, 70 impact damage, and cause a bleeding of strength 3 per pellet. This means you can do up to 165 structural damage, 770 impact damage, and cause a bleeding of strength 33 if all the pellets hit. It also has a 2-second stun for each pellet and a penetration chance of 20%. Next, let's do the same breakdown as we did for the coil gun. Starting off with the railgun is really great at damaging large single targets in submarines with the regular and Corium variants. Now with the addition of canister shells, it's great for swarms too. Moving on to this is pretty straightforward. For the regular and Corium variants, medium to long range is best. And for close range, you'll be wanting to use canister shells unless you're fighting large monsters. This is due to the explosive damage of the other railgun shell types. Next is cost and availability. The regular shells can be bought from traders for around 84 marks. But if you have a fabricator on board, this can be made with 1 steel bar. For canister shells, these can be picked up from traders for around 100 marks. Although these are in limited supply. But they can be fabricated for 1 steel and 1 lead. This sets you back 36 marks. In addition, they can be refilled for just 1 lead, so you won't run out anytime soon. For Saikorium, however, it's the same story as the coil gun variant. It can only be bought from mining outposts if they have it in stock for 180 marks, or deconstructed from alien artifacts. So not great for availability. Here's the breakdown table highlighting damage, potential damage, and the cost from vendors versus fabricating the different variants. Now, here's where things get interesting. You can actually load up a regular Saikorium or nuclear shell with additional explosives, meaning you can now modify the base damage of a railgun shell upon impact. This makes railguns one of the most dangerous weapons in the game. So the TLDR for this one is as follows. Canister and regular shells are cheap and in good supply. Just make sure to rotate them out for those long and short range fights. Save your Saikorium for more difficult encounters, and add explosives to really pack a punch. Ahoy there, crewmates! Sorry to interrupt the video. Hope you're enjoying everything so far. Make sure to hit that like button if you do. It not only helps me out, but it helps other people looking for this kind of content as well. So yeah, it's a win-win situation for everyone. Hit that like button. And that's enough from me. Back on with the video. Next on the turret list, we have pulse lasers. Pulse lasers are a new addition to the Thunder and Ice update. They fire a laser beam that has no travel time and immediately hits the target. It has 2 ammunition variants in the form of fuel. We have the regular and the tri-laser. The regular box has 44 charges. It does 25 structural damage, 30 internal, and 40 burning. It also has an explosive property of a 1.5 meter blast radius. This applies an additional 30 burning damage. The beam can also apply a stun of up to 0.4 seconds. The tri-laser ammunition box has 28 charges and fires 3 lasers with a 100% penetration chance. Each of these lasers can do 15 structural damage, 33 burning, and 15 internal. Like the regular, it also has an explosive blast radius of 1.5 meters. This does an additional 25 burning damage and can apply a stun for up to 0.2 seconds. Breaking down these ammunition variants, let's start off with who. The regular ammunition box is great for single targets and submarines. Its tri-laser variant is better at swarms, but can still inflict heavy damage against single targets and submarines. The wear for pulse lasers is less important than other turrets. This is because it can hit targets near or far immediately. And as the explosive radius is so small, the chance of self-damage is very low. Next, we're going to look at cost and availability. Starting off with the regular ammunition, it costs around 325 marks for 1. When moving to the fabricated version, it requires lithium and alien blood. Lithium is relatively cheap at 70 marks, but is in limited supply and only available from the mining outpost. And it's the same story for alien blood. This can only be bought in limited supply from research outposts for 144 marks. As a side note, alien blood can be acquired from deconstructing a strange or mudraptor egg. It can also be retrieved off crawlers or hammerheads. These additional sources do bring down the accessibility difficulty slightly, but referencing the subtle economy mechanic, you can make a tidy profit selling eggs, so I'll leave you to make a judgment call. The tri-laser variant is even harder. If you are lucky, you can pick one up from the research or military outpost for around 500 marks. To fabricate it, it requires the rare alien metal Fulgurium and 1 alien blood. Fulgurium being only purchasable from the mining outpost at 180 marks, and alien blood at 144 from the research outpost. Here's the breakdown table for all that information. As such, I would say the tri-laser variant right now is the hardest ammunition to acquire in the game, from both a cost and availability perspective. The final turret to look at on the list is the chaingun. The chaingun is another addition from the Thunder and Ice update. It boasts an incredibly high rate of fire at 10 rounds per second. However, it takes time for the main barrel to spin up before it can fire, and is much more inaccurate than the other turret types. The chain gun contains 2 new ammunition variants, the regular chain bolt and the Saikorium variant. The regular variant has 149 bullets per box. It does structural damage of 12, internal damage of 16, causes bleeding strength 4, and has a penetration chance of 35%. The Corium variant also has 149 bullets. It does 18 structural damage, 24 internal damage, bleeding of strength 4, and a penetration chance of 35%. In addition to its higher damage, it can also apply a stun for up to 2 seconds. So for the breakdown, let's talk about who. This turret is great for swarms or submarines, as it has a higher rate of fire and penetration compared to other ammunition variants. For wear, this turret is actually great long or short range. Moving on to cost and availability, the regular ammunition box can be picked up for 325 marks, but is in limited supply. It takes 1 titanium aluminium alloy at 168 marks, 1 steel at 22, and 1 aluminium at 44 marks to fabricate, with the refill option being 1 lead and 1 titanium aluminium alloy. So it's not the best in availability due to the titanium aluminium alloy requirement, but it's also not the worst. The Corium variant is a bit more expensive. First off, it cannot be bought from any station. It takes the rare metal Corium at 180 marks. It also requires 1 titanium aluminium alloy at 168 marks and 1 aluminium ore at 44 to fabricate. The refill option obviously not requiring aluminium. The rarity of Corium along with the limited supply of titanium aluminium alloy puts this one up there with very difficult to get hold of. And here we have the breakdown table. The TLDR for this one is that chain guns fire a lot of bullets very quickly, so are a great opener on multiple targets. But it's really not suited for long fights without enough ammunition. However, I do think these do well against large single entities due to the high bleed damage per bullet that can stack into other afflictions. Next, I briefly wanted to cover depth charges. Whilst these are not turrets, they do have a role to play in the new update with pirate submarines. There are 4 variants, all of which do damage, but 2 have an additional function to attract monsters away from the ship. The regular charge shell and its decoy variant do 1 structural damage and 10 affliction, so not too much in terms of damage. However, like the railgun, the depth charge shells can be loaded with explosives. This will add additional damage upon impact, which brings us on to the last section of this video. This gets its own section because it has the highest damage output of all the turret and depth charge variants in the game. Now, I know this video is meant to be more informational, and I'm trying to keep my personal recommendations to a minimum, but from experience, nuclear will cause more trouble than it's worth. The blast radius is huge, and the fallout is probably the most expensive thing to fix. In terms of statistics, the nuclear shell does a combined structural damage of 1075. This is almost 20 times more powerful than the regular railgun shell. It does a base damage to entities of 250 internal and applies a bleeding of strength 50. In addition to this, it has explosive damage with a range of 10 meters. This does 500 internal damage, 300 burning, and causes radiation sickness of strength 100. On top of all that, it can stun a target for up to 20 seconds. The nuclear depth charge also does 1075 structural damage. It has a blast radius of 10 meters, causes 400 internal damage, 300 burning, radiation sickness of 100. Both variants also have an EMP wave that interferes with sonar. However, the most destructive thing about nuclear is the long-term affliction radiation sickness. You will receive the radiation affliction that will kill you unless treated. This is especially noteworthy as the medications for treatment are rare to buy, difficult to fabricate, and in very short supply from all traders. I have lost more crewmates and time in using nuclear than any other ammunition variant. So, on to the breakdown. I would say for who, it can take on pretty much any entity in the game. For the where, it's as far away as possible. You do not want to use nuclear anywhere near your submarine. As an additional recommendation, I would not allow NPC characters to use this shell type. This is because they do not take into consideration the distance of targets. For cost and accessibility, however, nuclear is actually pretty good. It costs around $450 to buy for both the shell and depth charge variants, and can be bought in multiple locations. To fabricate them requires 1 IC4 and 1 uranium, both of which can be acquired fairly cheaply by deconstructing fuel rods and explosive coil gun ammunition. So for the damage versus cost comparison, I think nuclear wins outright for the most damage done versus cost to use. Here we have the breakdown table. For damage potential on this one, instead of using the penetration damage as a multiplier, I think the 10-meter radius is a better gauge. But I think even that is conservative, as if you line your shot up, pretty much everything inside that 10-meter blast radius is dead. So the TLDR on this one is if you're going to use it, do so with extreme caution, and make sure to have enough anti-rad medical on hand for all your crew members in advance. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of how turrets and damage work in the game. I need to give a quick shout out to the Barotrauma Discord volunteers from the wiki section who helped to update the wiki and provide the up-to-date statistics for this video. A big thank you to them. Let me know in the comments below if I've missed anything, hit that like button to help more people discover this video, subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time, peace.